The air was thick with strain as the sound of boots crunching on rock reverberated through the faintly lit train yard. "You believe you're something extraordinary, huh?" The official jeered, his voice bound with scorn. The lady stood tall, her look consistent regardless of the trepidation rising underneath her quiet outside individuals. "As you don't have a place in places like this, you're basically nothing, simply one more no one claiming to have any meaning." She didn't jump, however, her quiet just energized his resentment. He snatched her arm, generally compelling her to her knees. "Answer me," he woofed. Still she wouldn't give him the fulfillment of a response. The scorn in his eyes consumed more. Splendid to him this was power predominance, the capacity to strip an individual of their respect without outcome. It began with a straightforward allegation she had been holding up at the stage when he singled her out. No reason was only the shade of her skin and the calm certainty she conveyed. "Show me your ID," he had requested, his tone sharp and steadfast. When she serenely made sense of that she didn't have it on her, his disposition moved, his eyes limiting as though he had found a crook and mask. "I needn't bother with your reasons," he spat, yanking her by the arm. "You're set to be taken to jail." "For what?" she asked, her voice consistent yet touched with mistrust. "For existing," he shot back briskly, hauling her through the spectators who turned away, their looks reluctant to intercede. Some mumbled unobtrusively, yet nobody ventured forward. She was separated from everyone else in this battle. The embarrassment went on as he pushed her into the rear of his watch vehicle, driving her to a confined piece of the rail yard. The dimness of the region reflected the obscurity in his activities as they showed up. The official hauled her out with pointless power, the metallic clunking of binds reverberating in the night air. "This ends up peopling like you when they don't have the foggiest idea about their place," he said, his words sharp and intentional. He constrained her to the ground close to the tracks, binding her hands with modern strength. Zip ties she battled, yet his solidarity and his weapon kept her under control. "The reason why are you doing this?" she at long last asked, her voice breaking a break in her generally formed exterior. He inclined and closed his breath, hot and loaded up with toxin. "Since I can and nobody will stop me." The thunder of a coming train developed stronger somewhere far off, the weak shine of its headlights penetrating through the murkiness. Frenzy grasped her, yet she battled to stay cool-headed. She wasn't simply a casualty, she was something more, something he was unable to see. The train horn boomed and briefly a glint of dread crossed her face. It was all the fulfillment he wanted. "There it is," he said conceitedly, venturing back and folding his arms. "How about we perceive how far that disposition of yours gets you now?" What he didn't understand, what he was unable to grasp, was that this second wasn't the end, it was the starting. The lady had confronted treacheries before, however this one conveyed a weight she hadn't experienced as of not long ago. She wasn't only battling for herself, she was battling for each quiet observer, each individual who had been from her point of view and left with scars. As the train barreled nearer, something moved, her trepidation transformed into resolve. Her quiet became stronger than his messages, and behind the scenes the universe appeared to plan for a retribution. He was unable to get away, however what occurred next would turn the world topsy-turvy. The official idea he had an overwhelming advantage, that he was distant. However, as the first light drew nearer and reality disentangled his power, disintegrated piece by piece, what he didn't understand, what he was unable to envision, was the tempest traveling his direction, a tempest that would uncover all that he represented and strip him of the very power he manhandled. Who was this lady, as a matter of fact, and how should one night, one demonstration of disdain bring his whole world crashing down? Stay until the end. This isn't simply a tale about retribution, it's about equity, mental fortitude, and a turn you won't ever see coming. At furrow of wind we stand solidly against bigotry, bias, and unfairness in any structure. To our dark crowd, we see you, we support you, and we're focused on recounting stories that enhance voices and mirror the versatility and power inside your local area. This divert has faith in making mindfulness and moving change through significant narrating. Currently, how about we plunge into the present story, an account of equity, flexibility, and a definitive TST. On the off chance that you haven't as of now, remember to buy in and hit the chime symbol to remain refreshed on each grasping story we bring. Partake in the venture ahead. The morning sun rose over the unassuming community of Greenwood, painting the sky in delicate tints of orange and pink. It was a town where everybody appeared to be aware, everybody a beautiful exterior concealing the breaks of firmly established divisions. The roads hushed up at this hour with just a periodic sound of a vehicle passing by or a retailer getting ready for the day ahead. It was in this town, apparently conventional yet layered with intricacies, that two lives were going to impact. Angela Carter was a lady of calm strength in her late 30s. She had constructed a vocation through sheer assurance and a furious feeling of equity. Experiencing childhood in Greenwood was difficult for somebody like her, yet Angela was never one to be dissuaded by obstruction. She had been raised by her grandma, an on-rubbish lady who functioned as a house cleaner for one of the richer families around. Angela learned from the get-go that the world wasn't fair, yet her grandma's illustrations imparted in her a conviction that she could change things in the event that she buckled sufficiently down. Long periods of examining and penance had paid off. When Angela joined the police foundation, she was driven not by a craving for power, however, by a well-established need to make her local area more secure, and all the more her way wasn't smooth. Being one of the couple of people of color in regulation and ferment implied steady examination both from her associates and the local area, yet Angela endured ascending through the positions with a steadfast center. Her hard-working attitude and sharp senses ultimately procured her a standing as perhaps the most equipped official in the state. Angela had as of late gotten back to Greenwood in the wake of expenditure 10 years in bigger urban areas. The town had changed here and there, yet continued as before in others. Her new job as top of the nearby police division was an open door she took proudly, and fear Greenwood's policing history was damaged with debasement and bias, and Angela realized she had a difficult, but not impossible task ahead. Yet she was still up in the air to show others how it's done, to demonstrate that honesty could win even in the most difficult conditions. Across town, official Daniel Hayes was starting his day. Hayes was a man in his mid-40s with a lifelong that crossed north of 20 years to the easygoing onlooker. He was the image of a dedicated official, generally in uniform, watching the roads and implementing the regulation with a practically fanatical energy. However, underneath the surface, Hayes held on to a more obscure side. Brought up in a family soaks in custom, he experienced childhood in a family that saw change as a danger. His dad had been a cop as well, and Hayes emulated his example, taking on the equivalent inflexible perspective. For Hayes, the identification was more than an image of power. It was a safeguard that supported his activities regardless of how sketchy. He had faith altogether and control, frequently befuddling those ideas with strength and bias throughout the long term. His associates saw his brutal treatment of specific local area individuals. However, the way of life of quietness inside the office permitted him to proceed with unrestrained. Greenwood was his town, and Hayes thought of it as his obligation to keep up with it the manner in which he saw fit. The day their ways crossed started like some other. Angela was checking on reports in her unassuming office at the station, her mind previously dashing with thoughts for changes she had plans to carry out. Predisposition, preparing local area outreach programs and stricter responsibility gauges. However, change was rarely simple, and opposition from inside the division was unmistakable. Many officials disdained her presence, seeing her as a pariah in spite of her underlying foundations in Greenwood. Hayes, in the meantime, was watching the train station, a spot he visited under the pretense of keeping up with security. To him, the station was a microcosm of the town, a spot where he could declare his position. It was here that he seen Angela wearing easygoing clothing. She was sitting tight for a companion showing up from away. Hayes didn't perceive her. She wasn't in uniform, and he presently couldn't seem to meet his new supervisor. To Hayes, Angela was simply one more face, another focus to investigate. He moved toward her with the quality of somebody acclimated with having his orders submitted to men. "May I see your ID?" he asked, his tone firm. However, stooping, Angela looked into, shocked by the unexpected interference. "Excuse me, is there a issue, official? I'm posing the inquiries here," Hayes answered, his eyes limiting. "Let me see your ID." Angela delayed, befuddled by his forceful attitude. "I don't know why that is essential. I'm only here to get somebody." Hayes could have done without her tranquility. To him it seemed like disobedience. "I will not ask again," he said, his voice rising. "Show me your ID or we will have an issue." Angela's nature was to disculate. However, she additionally realized her privileges. "Official, with all due regard, I don't completely accept that I've effectively warranted this treatment." Ruffordge's patient snapped. He got her arm. His his grasp firm and unforgiving. That is sufficient. Pivot. You're accompanying me. What are you doing? Angela asked, her voice ascending in mistrust. This is superfluous. However, Hayes wasn't tuning into him. This was about control, about taking care of her. He radioed in an obscure report about a dubious individual and accompanied Angela to his watch vehicle. The passerby at the station traded uncomfortable looks, however said nothing. Angela was taken to an isolated part of the rail yard, her fights failing to receive any notice when they showed up. Hayes hauled her out generally and constrained her to sit close to the tracks. He limited her options, overlooking her inquiries and protests. Individuals like you, he scoffed, need to poise vacillating. Interestingly, you don't have the foggiest idea who I'm, she said discreetly, her voice touched with both trepidation and insubordination. You're no one, Hayes answered icily, and you're going to figure out what happens when no one's believe they're exempt from the laws that apply to everyone else. The far-off sound of an moving toward train consumed the space, and interestingly Hayes permitted himself a grin. He accepted he had won, yet he was wrong. He didn't have the foggiest idea about reality with regards to the lady before him. He didn't have the foggiest idea about that his activities were making way for a retribution he would never have expected. The thunder of the moving toward train became stronger each second, adding weight to the stifling pressure all around. Angela sat bound, her wrists hurting from the zip ties, her brain hustling through the hurricane of feelings, outrage, dread, and a sharp purpose cutting through everything opposite her. Hayes remained with his arms crossed, the weak gleam of the train headlights reflecting in his cool, undaunted eyes. You don't indeed even understand what you've done, Angela said, her voice consistent notwithstanding the beating of her heart. She was delaying computing each word as the thunder of the train crawled nearer. Hayes laughed, his tone bound with joke. Gracious, I know precisely very thing I've done. I've put another pompous mouth where it should be. You believe you're exceptional, that you can stroll around like this. Town knows you something. Not any longer. Angela didn't answer promptly, lie rather. She looked past him toward the weak blueprints of the rail yard. Her breathing was controlled, yet her brain beat. She wasn't simply pondering her quick endurance, she was considering what this second could mean of the bigger picture, the breaks in the framework that had permitted somebody like Ruffage to work on her. As strained, the train horn blasted, snapping her concentration back to the current. It was close now, the vibrations from the rails shaking the ground underneath her. You don't comprehend, Angela said, her voice low yet accused of something. Hayes didn't perceive a propensity of force. This won't end the manner in which you think it will. Huge words for somebody attached to a train track, Ruffage scoffed. It doesn't matter to me who you assume you are. Over here you're nothing. Angela got the weak sound of development behind feet. However, she didn't allow her look to sell out. At each fiber of her being encouraged her to act now, to push through the trepidation and slow down him long enough. She inclined forward somewhat, her tone moving. You've went through your entire time on Earth like this, haven't you? Searching for somebody to fault. There's no need to focus on me, it's about you. Shut up. Feet snapped, his quiet outside breaking. She pushed on, her words slicing through his poise. You think this makes areas of strength for you, it gives you control, yet you're not in charge. Murkiness not any longer. The weak sound behind him developed. Near Ray, shadow moved between the metal light emissions rail yard framework, purposeful however quiet. Angela's sharp impulses got it, and she realized it was her opportunity, her main opportunity. She simply required dimness diverted a second longer. Do you figure individuals will look the alternate way this time, she asked, her voice rising. Do you think you are unapproachable? I expressed. Shut up, Hayes woofed, venturing nearer to her, his face creeps from hers. The train horn shouted, the light washing them both in a brutal gleam. Ha's hand jerked toward the rod at his hip, a reflex in excess of a danger. Angela gazed back at him unblinking. You're frightened, aren't you? That was the second the shadow behind him moved. The noisy bang of metal striking the ground broke Ha's center. He turned around, however it was past the point of no return. A figure arose, one of the rail laborers Angela had taken note prior, a wiry man with an endured face and sharp eyes. He employed a long wrench, ready like a weapon. Step away, the man snarled, his voice slicing through the mayhem like steel. Hayes delayed the briefest gleam of vulnerability crossing his face. This doesn't concern you, he said, his hand fixing on the mallet. It does now, the man shot back, his look flicked to Angela tied on the ground, then back to Hayes. Loosen her now, Hayes chuckled, yet there was a strain to it, a break in his veneer. You don't have the foggiest idea who you're managing, and you don't have the foggiest idea what you're doing, the man countered, venturing nearer. The wrench in his grasp gleamed under the floodlights. You think you're the law here? Not this evening. You're not. The train was perilously close at this point. its brakes shrieking as the guide recognized the figures on the track. Angela felt the ground shake underneath her and contorted against the zip ties her wrists crude from the work. Her voice cut through the stalemate. "Get me off these tracks or you'll think twice about it." Hayes turned around to her, his face curved with fierceness. He pulled the cudgel from his belt, venturing forward with total surrender. However, the rail specialist wasn't polishing. He swung the wrench with accuracy, striking Ruffordge's arm also, sending the twirly-do clacking to the ground. Hayes staggered, grasping his arm in torment, and the rail laborer didn't hold back. He snatched a utility blade from his belt, dropped to his knees next to Angela, and cut through the zip ties. "Run," he said immovably. Angela didn't squander a subsequent. She mixed to her feet, the train now simple yards away. The rail specialist pulled her off out of control similarly as the train roared, the power of its section thumping them both to the ground. Briefly there was quiet, broken simply by the blurring sound of the train and the weighty breathing of each of the three figures. Hayes stumbled to his feet, his face a cover of fury. "You've made a mix-up," he murmured, pointing a shaking finger at Angela. "Both of you." Angela fixed her wrists, actually consuming from the ties, yet her eyes were consistent, her voice faithful. "No, Hayes, the error was yours." The rail specialist remained next to her, his wrench still close by. Hayes took a gander at them both, the heaviness of what had simply happened beginning to soak in, yet the fire in his eyes hadn't diminished. It consumed more, blazing, powered by embarrassment and a perilous feeling of franticness. "You think this is over?" Feed spat, his voice shaking with rage. "You have no clue about who you're managing." Angela ventured nearer, her look locked on his. "Neither do you." As Hayes withdrew into the shadows, his statement still reverberating in the air, Angela felt the principal stirrings of something she hadn't permitted herself to feel yet. Yet it wasn't over, not yet. The retribution was coming, and it would shake the establishment of all that Hayes thought he controlled. The rail specialist went to her, his demeanor incoherent. "You going to be all right?" Angela gestured, her voice consistent. "I will be, nevertheless. This isn't gotten done." And as she left the tracks, her heart beating with adrenaline and reason, she knew the genuine fight was simply starting. The station's bright lights glimmered faintly as Angela entered the area, her step estimated yet tenacious. She had been here many times previously, however this evening it felt different. The air was weighty, accused of expectation. Officials stood around there. Discussions quieted as she passed. They stayed away from her look, some out of inconvenience, others out of culpability. The heaviness of her presence this evening wasn't something they could overlook, not any longer. Angela's wrists still dragged faint red imprints from the zip ties Fogg had used to tie her. She felt the sting each time she flexed her hands, yet it just filled in as a sign of what was in question. This evening wasn't about retaliation, it was about equity, about uncovering the decay that had putrefied in the office for unreasonably lengthy. Inside the mains office a little gathering was at that point accumulated. Commander, mill operator, a bald man with diminishing hair, remained close to the window, apprehensively tasting his espresso. Close to him was investigator Sarah Quinn, one of a handful of the officials Angela believed. Certainly her sharp eyes dashed toward Angela as she entered, quietly inquiring as to whether she was prepared. Angela gave an inconspicuous gesture, and afterward there was cloudiness. He sat at the most distant finish of the table, his stance firm, his jaw gripped. The unease transmitting from him was practically intense. He hadn't expected this, a gathering called so out of nowhere, so purposely. His eyes met Angela's for a brief second, and she saw it, a glimmer of disquiet underneath the bluster. "Thank you for being here," Angela started, her voice consistent, ordering. She didn't sit, she expected to stand, to consume the room completely. "I've assembled this conference to address a question of grave significance, a matter that concerns this division as well as the trustworthiness of the law we committed to maintain." Hayes jeered, perceptibly inclining back in his seat. "This sounds like a talk," he mumbled. "Could we at any point jump to the part where you let us know this truly about?" Angela's eyes restricted, however she didn't fall for the trap. Rather, she opened a document she had put on the table the previous night. "I was unlawfully confined, attacked and left in a circumstance that might have cost me my life." The room fell quiet. Even Skipper mill operator quit squirming, his espresso mug frozen most of the way to his lips. Ruffordge's articulation solidified, a weak sheen of sweat noticeable on his sanctuary. "I don't have to relate the subtleties," Angela proceeded, her look enduring the realities represent themselves. However, what makes the biggest difference here isn't exactly what befallen me, it's what it addresses: an example of misuse, a culture of exemption, and the disappointment of administration to consider people responsible. This is ludicrous. Hayes intruded on his voice, rising. You're making ridiculous allegations. You want to simply come in here and smear my name without evidence. Angela didn't wince. She ventured into the record and delivered a little USB drive, holding it up so that the room could see verification. She rehashed her tone, cutting, I have a very sizable amount of. She strolled to the room's projector and connected the drive. The screen on the wall gleamed to life, showing grainy film of the rail yard from a camera situated high on a close-by structure. Hayes' voice occupied the room. His venomous words are reverberating through the quiet. You believe you're exempt from the rules that everyone else follows. The recording. Blast, you're nothing, and I will demonstrate it. The variety depleted from Hayes' face as the recording kept showing each horrible word, each brutal activity. The room watched in shocked quiet as the situation transpired, finishing at the time Angela was attached to the tracks. At the point when the video finished, Angela went to confront Hayes straightforwardly. This is the kind of person you are, she said, her voice consistent however loaded up with an edge of wrath. This is what you address, and this finishes. Presently Feed shot up from his seat scratching boisterously against the floor. This is capture. It's doctored. You set me up. Analyst Quinn made some noise, her tone sharp. The recording came straightforwardly from the rail yard security framework. It's legitimate and it's cursing. You can't do this to me, Ruffage murmured, his voice shaking with rage. I've given my life to this division, to this town, and what have you taken from it? Angela countered, venturing nearer. The number of lives that have you destroyed? The number of individuals have you designated? Basically on the grounds that you could. This isn't a round one occurrence, Ruffage. This is about an example of conduct that stops today. Chief mill operator at last gotten comfortable with himself. However, it was precarious. Hayes, this is significant. You want to step back, and I'm not moving away from anything, Hayes thundered, hammering his clenched hand on the table. She's attempting to obliterate me, and you're all letting her. Angela held her ground, her voice slicing through the tumult. You obliterated yourself, Hayes. Your activities, your decisions, they brought you here. You assumed you were distant. However, reality has an approach to tracking down its approach to the surface. Ha's breathing was battered now, his self-control disentangling. He checked out the room looking for partners, yet tracked down none. The heaviness of his activities, his words, his savagery, everything was crashing down on him. This isn't over, he spat at long last, his voice low and venomous. You'll lament this. Angela didn't answer promptly. She let his words linger, palpably weighty and inept. Then she ventured forward, meeting his look one final time. No, Hayes, she said solidly, you will lament it. Two officials went into the room then. At that point, gathered by Commander Mill operator, they moved toward Hayes mindfully, one of them conveying a couple of cuffs. Daniel Hayes, one of them, started. You're set to be taken to jail for attack, unlawful confinement, and endeavored murder. Ha's face curved in a combination of fury and mistrust as the binds clicked around his wrists. He battled momentarily, yet at last yielded, his head balancing low as he was driven out of the room. The quietness that followed was thick with implicit words. Angela went to the leftover officials, her look clearing over them. This office will transform, she said, her voice unflinching, and it begins now. As she left the room, the heaviness of what had recently unfolded settled over her. This was just the starting. There was still such a great amount to remake, such a huge amount to mend. However, interestingly, she felt a promising sign that equity could win even in a town like Greenwood. The glaring lights of the region foyer flashed as cloudiness was accompanied away. His shoulders slouched, his face pale. Angela watched from the entryway, her demeanor indistinguishable, yet inside a tempest brewed. This was a triumph in any case. It didn't feel like one, basically not yet. She may as yet hear the reverberations of his venomous words, actually feel the sting of each and every foul play he had incurred on her as well as on so many others. This wasn't over. Criminal investigator Quinn moved toward her, face fixed with stress, yet in addition a clue of adoration. Are you all right, she asked, her voice low. Angela gestured, however her body double-crossed the strain she conveyed. I will be, she said, her tone estimated, yet there's something else to do. Ruffage isn't the only one. Quinn folded her arms, her eyes limiting insightfully. You're correct, he's simply the side effect of a lot greater sickness. The inquiry is the way. Profound does it go? Angela turned, strolling toward her office with Quinn not far behind. Different officials in the region moved out of their way, some contribution, temporary looks of responsibility, others of interest. Angela didn't recognize them. She had gone through years battling for this second. However, she realized the quarrel wasn't simply over Hayes, it was tied in with everything he addressed. Inside the workplace, Angela shut the entryway behind them. She inclined against her work area, her fingers brushing against the edge of the USB drive still in her grasp. Quinn, we really want to go through everything, each objection, each record, if there's an example I have any desire to be aware of it. Quinn raised an eyebrow, resting up against the wall. You will take the whole division separated, aren't you? Angela looked into her eyes, wild, assuming that is the stuff to revamp it. Yes. The room fell quiet for a second, the heaviness of their discussion settling between them. At long last, Quinn sighed, you have my help. However, you know it won't be simple. There are individuals here who've looked the alternate way for a really long time. They're not going to change since feed is gone. Angela's look didn't falter then. At that point, they'll go excessively. A thump on the entryway hindered them. Chief Mill Operator ventured inside, his face drawn and reluctant. He looked between the two ladies prior to speaking. Angela, we want to talk. Quinn fixed her pose, cautious. Is there an issue? Commander Mill Operator sighed, running a hand through his diminishing hair. There's dependably an issue, Quinn. However, this one, it's convoluted. Angela motioned for him to her understanding dainty. Out with it. Mill Operator wavered prior to talking again. The city chairman's office called Haas capture is now causing waves. There are individuals who, how about we simply say, aren't content with how this is being taken care of. Angela squinted her eyes, her voice quiet yet cool. Let me surmise they more worried about the office's notoriety than the way that one of its officials attempted to kill me. Mill Operator recoiled. In any case, didn't deny it. Look, Angela, you know how legislative issues work. They're stressed over claims about open discernment. Hayes has companions in high places, individuals who could attempt to utilize this against you. Angela stood straighter, her voice sharp. Let them attempt. I'm not sponsorship down. Mill Operator moaned again, his shoulder listing. I didn't figure you would simply be cautious. This isn't just about Hayes any longer. As Mill Operator left the room, Quinn gone to Angela, her jaw tight. They will battle you constantly, I realize, Angela answered, her voice unflinching. However, they've been battling individuals like me for ages. I'm not scared of them. The entryway opened again, this time uncovering a junior official, his face pale and anxious. Ma'am, he said, tending to Angela, there's somebody here to see you. Says it's critical. Angela traded a look with Quinn prior to following the official out into the region entryway. A lady remained there, her stance tense, her hands gripping an envelope firmly to her chest. She gazed upward as Angela moved toward her, face scratched with assurance. Boss Carter, the lady said, her voice consistent regardless of the clear nerves. I go by Maria Vasquez. I really want to talk with you. It's about Roughage. Angela's temple wrinkled, yet she signaled for Maria to follow her back to the workplace. Once inside, Maria faltered, her fingers grasping the organizer like, oh help, I don't have the foggiest idea how to begin. She conceded, take as much time as necessary. Angela said, her tone delicate yet firm. You're protected here. Maria gestured, taking a full breath prior to opening the organizer and putting its items on the work area. Photos, reports and manually written notes poured out. Angela and Quinn inclined in, their articulations obscuring as they inspected the proof. These are records of grievances documented against Hayes. Maria made sense of some of them were mine, others came from individuals locally, yet they were undeniably disregarded, hidden where no one will think to look. I attempted to battle it, however I was told to drop it to keep my work. Angela's jaw fixed. To let you know that, Maria faltered prior to noting Chief Mill Operator. Quinn's eyes broadened and Angela's stomach beat. She reclined, her psyche dashing. This goes further than I naturally suspected, she murmured. Maria gestured, her voice shaking. Presently it's not only Hayes, there are others, officials who've safeguarded him, who've covered for himself as well. As it's not simply about bigotry, it's debasement, maltreatment of force. All that. Angela took a profound breath, steadying herself. Maria, thank you for approaching this. Took boldness. Maria shook her head. I'm simply fed up with being apprehensive. Angela connected, putting a consoling hand on Maria's. You will not need to be any longer, I guarantee you that. Quinn checked Angela out, her demeanor a blend of relevance and concern. What now? Angela stood, her resolve solidifying. Now we uncover everything, no more mysteries, no more quiet. The situation unfolding in Greenwood wasn't just about murkiness any longer, it was about a framework that had flourished with dread and complicity, and Angela Carter was prepared to tear it all down. The area was calmer now, the pressure all around thick enough to slice through. Angela sat at her work area, her her fingers steepled under her jaw, the weight of the disclosures pushing down on her like an iron cover. Opposite her, Investigator Quinn rested up against the file organizer, arms crossed, her face muddled. "How profound do you think this goes?" Quinn asked, separating the quiet. Angela looked, her gaze sharp. "Profound enough that individuals like Maria have been hushed for quite a long time. Profound enough that mill operator is important for it. Hayes isn't the starting, and he's most certainly not the end." Quinn breathed out leisurely. "Mill operator" was continuously elusive, yet this I would have rather not accepted it. Angela didn't answer quickly, rather she got one of the reports Maria had left. It was a grievance, composed however unsigned, itemizing a progression of rough experiences among Hayes and local area individuals. The language was exact, the tone frantic. "Glance at this," Angela said, holding it out. Quinn ventured forward, accepting the paper. As she read, her lips squeezed into a slim line. "They reported all that," Quinn murmured, "and it just vanished." "Not any longer," Angela said immovably. She stood pacing the room. "We must be shrewd about this. In the event that mill operator's involved, it implies others are too. We want to get this proof and make sure it gets to the perfect individuals." Quinn curved an eyebrow. "The ideal individuals? You think anybody higher up will really take care of this? They'll cover it very much like they covered Maria's grumblings." Angela quit pacing, her hands laying on the edge of the work area. "Then we don't give them the opportunity. We open up to the world." Quinn squinted, her shock obvious. "Public? You mean a question and answer session?" Angela gestured. "Precisely. We lay everything out. Hayes, mill operator, the foundational cover-ups. Once it's out there they can't disregard it. Individuals won't let them." Quinn wavered. "It is an intense move. You'll make a ton of money." Angela's look didn't falter. "Haven't arrived to make companions, Quinn. I'm here to make the right decision." Before Quinn could answer, there was a thump at the entryway. One of the more youthful officials, Martinez, stepped in, his face pale. "Boss, there's something you want to see." Angela traded a look with Quinn prior to following Martinez out into the primary room. He drove them to the warm-up area where a little gathering of officials was assembled around a TV. The nearby news was on, and the title looking across the lower part of the shout made Angela's stomach drop. "Greenwood Police Boss." And during an onslaught inside outrage uncovered, the anchor's voice was consistent, practically clinical, as she conveyed the report. "Sources inside the Greenwood Police Division guarantee that Boss Angela Carter has been utilizing her position to target veteran officials, including Daniel Hayes, who was as of late captured on controversial charges. Pundits contend that Carter's activities are politically persuaded, pointed toward destroying well-established customs inside the office." Angela held her clenched hands. "They're turning it," she said, her voice low however stewing with outrage. Quinn folded her arms, her demeanor dull. "Mill operator probably warned them. He's attempting to control the story before we can." Angela went to Martinez. "Did they say anything more? Who's their source?" Martinez shook his head. "They didn't name names yet. They're painting you as the reprobate boss." The room fell quiet, the heaviness of the circumstance soaking to Angela. She had expected obstruction, yet this was an immediate assault. They weren't simply trying to ruin her, they were attempting to obliterate her. "Let them," Angela said at long last, her voice consistent. "Let them toss all that they have at me, since when this is over they will not have anything left." Quinn ventured nearer, her tone careful. "Angela, this could misfire in the event that we push too hard. We don't have a decision." Angela hindered. "They've controlled the story for a really long time. It's time we came clean." As the officials around her traded questionable looks, Angela went to confront them completely. "I know some of you are frightened. I realize this isn't what you pursued, yet this is our opportunity to change things, to make this division something we can be in every way pleased with. I can't do it single-handedly. I want your assistance." Martins ventured forward, his stance reluctant however resolved. "You have mine, boss." Gradually, others started to gesture, their looks moving from vulnerability to determined. Angela felt a flash of trust. It wasn't a lot, however it was a beginning. "Quinn," Angela expressed, going to her beginning, drafting the assertion, "We're holding a press gathering tomorrow first thing." Quinn gestured. "You got it." As the room scattered, Angela remained behind, gazing at the now muffled TV screen. The picture of Hazza's grinning face filled the screen, a distinct sign of the battle ahead. However, Angela did waver. She had made significant progress, gotten through an excessive amount to withdraw now. The following morning the region parking area was loaded up with correspondents, their cameras and amplifiers focused on the shoddy platform set up close to the entry. Angela remained behind the platform, her shoulders squared, her articulation quiet however furious. The daylight gleamed off her identification, an image of the authority she had contended energetically to procure. As the group calmed, Angela took a profound breath and started. "Great morning, I am Angela Carter and I'm the head of police here in Greenwood. Today I stand before you as an official of the law as well as an individual from this local area, one that has been bombed endlessly time again by those committed to safeguard it." The journalists inclined in their pens, ready, their cameras moving. Angela didn't waver for quite a long time. This division has worked under a culture of quiet and conflict, permitting people like Daniel Hayes to mishandle their power without outcome. This finishes. "Today I have proof of fundamental defilement, proof that ensnares Hayes as well as others inside this division who have empowered him." The mumbles in the group developed stronger, the unease overwhelming. "I realize there are the people who will attempt to dishonor me, who will attempt to paint me as the issue. Let them. I stand here with reality and I won't withdraw. To individuals of Greenwood, you merit better and I guarantee you we will make this right." As she completed the correspondence, ejected with questions, their voices covering in a whirlwind of darkness, Angela ventured back, letting Quinn take over. As she got away from the platform, she felt the heaviness existing apart from everything else, the tremendousness of what lay ahead. In any case, she likewise felt something different, expectation without precedent. For quite a while she accepted that change was conceivable. The journalists' voices actually reverberated behind the scenes as Angela pulled back from the platform. Her psyche zeroed in on the fight that was presently completely moving. Quinn found her strolling energetically to match Angela's deliberate steps toward the region entryways. "That was one amazing discourse," Quinn said, her tone adjusting esteem and concern. "Yet presently they're going to come at you significantly harder. You realize that, right?" Angela halted at the region's steps, going to confront Quinn. Her look was consistent, her determination unshaken. "Let them. I've consumed my whole time on Earth facing conflicts like this. I'm not halting now." Before Quinn could answer, Martinez moved toward his, face pale with earnestness. "Boss, we have. What is happening? You really want to see this?" Angela's jaw fixed as she followed him inside, Quinn close behind her. The region's environment was tense, the normal murmur of action supplanted by murmurs and apprehensive looks. Martinez driven them to the preparation room where a PC was set up on the focal table. A video played on the screen, stopped at an implicating outline. Angela inclined in her stomach, agitating. The video showed her sitting at her work area talking with Maria Vasquez. The sound was clear, and keeping in mind that the actual words weren't cursing, the outlining was intended to make it seem as though Angela was constraining an observer. "Where did this come from?" Angela asked, her voice quiet yet bound with steel. Martinez wavered. "It was sent namelessly to a nearby news station. They broadcasted piece of it earlier today." Quinn collapsed her arms, her eyes limiting. "So they're attempting to make it appear as though you maneuvered Maria toward giving her explanation." Angela fixed her psyche, hustling. "Whoever released this approached the region. It implies it's somebody on the inside." Quinn gestured bleakly. "Mill operator perhaps, or on the other hand somebody working with him." Angela's considerations were intruded on by the unexpected appearance of Maria herself. She looked shaken, gripping her telephone firmly in her grasp. "Boss, have you seen this?" she asked, holding up the screen to show Angela the video playing on a circle. Angela gestured, signaling for Maria to sit. "I have. They're attempting to dishonor the two of us." Maria's voice faltered. "They're saying I'm lying, that you undermined me." To express out loud whatever I did, my family, they're receiving messages, dangers. Angela's heart held at the apprehension in Maria's voice. She hunkered down, meeting Maria's look straightforwardly. "Pay attention to me. You came clean and actually on our side. This is precisely exact thing they need to startle you, to make you back down. In any case, we can't allow them to win." Maria gestured gradually, however her hands actually shuddered. "I'm terrified," she conceded. "Imagine a scenario where they come after me or my children." Angela set a consoling hand on Maria's. "We'll safeguard you. I guarantee you're in good company in this." Quinn ventured forward, her voice firm. "Maria will allocate officials to watch your home and we'll figure out who's behind this video." Angela fixed her look, clearing over the room. "Quinn, I need a full review of our security frameworks, figure out who approached that recording, and when Martinez twofold check the proof lockup." Assuming they'd messed with this, they could have pursued different records too. The officials gestured, their assurance restored by Angela's resolute determination as the room discharged, letting Angela and Quinn be. The heaviness existing apart from everything else settled between them. "They're frantic," Quinn said later, along quiet. "On the off chance that they pulling stunts like this, it implies they know you're Winning Angela permitted herself a little stuffy grin. Urgency makes individuals risky. We can't stand to underrate them. Quinn wavered, then ventured nearer. Angela, you realize I have you covered, yet are you alright? I mean truly. Angela breathed out, her shoulders unwinding marginally. I don't have a decision, Quinn. I can't allow them to alarm me on the off chance that I waver now. All that we battled for will be in vain. Quinn gestured regard apparent in her appearance. Then we should ensure we don't waver. The hours that followed were a haze of action. Quinn and Martinez worked indefatigably to follow the starting points of the spilled video while Angela facilitated with a couple of partners she could trust. Each forward-moving step wanted to push against a tsunami. However, Angela wouldn't come by night. New proof arose, a progression of monetary records connecting mill operator to payouts from neighborhood organizations. The installments marked as discussion charges were not so subtle payoffs in return for favors. It was the confirmation Angela expected to attach mill operator to the debasement. When Quinn introduced the discoveries to Angela, her appearance was terrible, however victorious. This is all there is to it, she said, giving Angela the documents. This demonstrates mill operator's been in on this from the very outset. Angela contemplated the records, her determination solidifying. This is the thing we've been hanging tight for. Plan another press meeting for later. We're opening up to the world about this. Quinn faltered. Are you certain they're now coming after you hard? This will make you their main objective. Angela met Quinn's look, her voice firm. I'm as of now their main objective. The best way to win is to continue to push ahead. The following day the parking garage was indeed loaded up with journalists. Angela remained at the platform, the weight of the proof in her grasp. She started with quiet accuracy, spreading out the realities, Haas activities, the foundational disappointments that had empowered him, and presently mill operator's inclusion. As she talked, the group's mumbles developed stronger. The reality of the situation was evident, and Angela's unflinching conveyance ruled out uncertainty. Yet as she was completing a disturbance ejected at the rear of the group, Angela squinted against the daylight, her heart sinking as she perceived mill operator pushing his direction to the front, flanked by a few officials who had plainly conformed to him. This is a sham, mill operator yelled, his voice persisting the mumbles. You're obliterating this division with your falsehoods and feuds. Angela didn't wince. She moved away from the platform, letting the group's consideration shift to mill operator. These supposed allegations are ridiculous. Mill operator kept waving a pile of papers in the air. This lady doesn't care about ICE. She's here to destroy us. Angela hung tight for the disturbance to fade away prior to venturing forward again. Her voice was quiet, purposeful. Chief mill operator, assuming you have proof to discredit these cases, I recommend you present it now. Mill operator vacillated, his hot air emptying marginally. I needn't bother with proof to see what's occurring here. You're determined to even the score, boss Carter, yet you will not get mine. Angela's G didn't falter. The proof justifies itself, and individuals of Greenwood have the right to know reality. The group hummed with strain as mill operator withdrew his boasting, giving approach to the acknowledgement that he was cornered. Angela turned around to the journalists, her voice consistent. This quarrel isn't simply over me or this office, it's tied in with holding those in power responsible, and I won't stop until a fair consequence is given. As the press gathering finished and the group started to scatter, Angela felt the heaviness existing apart from everything else settle over her. This wasn't the and not yet. It was a step in the right direction, and for the present that was an adequate number of the weeks that followed were a tornado of examinations, renunciations and disclosures. Angela sat in her office late one night, the region calmer than it had been in years. The heaviness of all that she had gotten through weighted in the air, yet interestingly there was a feeling of clearness, a feeling of progress. Daniel Hayes had been condemned. Prior that day the court had been loaded, the air weighty with expectation. Hayes, deprived of his identification in his previous pomposity, had sat quietly as the appointed authority read the charges: endeavored murder, maltreatment of force, and various counts of wrongdoing. His sentence was serious and obvious. Update that even the individuals who accept themselves unapproachable could be considered responsible. Angela had watched from the rear of the court, her demeanor confused. A fair outcome had been given, however the scars dimness had left behind couldn't be deleted. Still, as he was driven away in cuffs, she felt a glint of trust. This was the start of another part, one where the haziness he addressed could as of now not cast its shadow over Greenwood. Chief mill operator's fall had been similarly as open, however undeniably more turbulent. The monetary records Angela and Quinn revealed had uncovered long periods of debasement ensnaring mill operator as well as a few other people who had plotted to keep up with the norm. Mill operator's fights of blamelessness developed more vulnerable as the proof mounted, confronting Overpowering strain. He surrendered in shame, leaving the office he had controlled for such a long time. Angela had been at the very front of the changes that followed. She worked enthusiastically to modify the division starting from the earliest stage up, carrying out new arrangements that accentuated responsibility and straightforwardness. Officials who opposed were supplanted, and the individuals who remained went through thorough preparation to guarantee they maintained the values Angela battled for. Maria Vasquez's dauntlessness had not gone inconspicuous. With Angela's help, she had stood up openly, her story moving others to approach with their own encounters. Together they had made a wave of progress that moved throughout the local area, ending the quietness that had permitted debasement to flourish. Maria found another feeling of direction, chipping in with nearby associations to help other people get comfortable with themselves. Her family, once focuses of dangers and terrorizing, now remained as images of strength and boldness. Criminal investigator Quinn had turned into Angela's right hand, her resolute help significant as they explored the difficulties of remaking. Together they had fashioned an organization established in trust and shared vision, their bond developing further with every triumph. Concerning Angela, her process had been everything except simple. The battle had set her back beyond what she might have expected. However, it had likewise shown her the strength of her convictions. She had confronted the most exceedingly awful her foes could toss at her, and arose more still up in the air than any other time to make an office that genuinely served its local area. Now as she sat in her office, the weak murmur of movement in the region helping her to remember how far they had come, Angela permitted herself an intriguing snapshot of reflection. Her eyes meandered to the outlined photograph on right in front of her, an image of her grandma, the one who had shown her the worth of trustworthiness. Furthermore, the significance of battling for what was correct. A delicate thump at the entryway pulled her from her viewpoints. Quinn ventured inside, a little grin all over. You prepared the people groups holding up. Angela stood smoothing the front of her jacket. We should not keep them holding up. They strolled together to the region's front advances, where a group had accumulated. Inhabitants of Greenwood, youthful and old, stood side by side, their countenances lit with trust and appreciation. Angela ventured to the platform, her heart full as she watched out at them. This excursion hasn't been simple, she started, her voice solid yet warm. Yet together we've shown what's conceivable when we won't keep quiet, when we stand up for what's right. Change doesn't work out coincidentally, and it doesn't occur without penance. Yet today we move forward together. The group emitted into adulation, their cheers reverberating during the time Angela ventured back, letting their voices consume the space without precedent. For quite a while she felt a feeling of harmony. Considering this story, contemplate the force of facing unfairness in any event, when the chances appear unfavorable. Angela's process advises us that fortitude isn't the shortfall of dread, it's acting disregarding it's about having faith in an option that could be greater than yourself and being willing to battle for it. Currently, I'd very much want to hear your contemplations. What stood apart to you in this story? How could it cause you to feel we should discuss it in the remarks? And on the off chance that you haven't as of now, remember to buy into Stories of Contort for additional accounts that challenge, motivate and shock. Together we can push these significant discussions along. Much obliged.